Hey everybody, I'm Jay.
And I'm Tracy, and together we lead the South Orange County Church.
Want to welcome you to our Connect video series, and we love getting to do this. We've been doing this for most of the year for 2021, and it's kind of coming to a close for now, and just this week and next week. So it's really been cool though. What we do in these videos is we get together and talk about something that Jesus said or did, or something that his followers said or did. And then we discuss it with one another. And we actually believe that by talking about it in a group, it helps us to get more out of it, even than just listening to a sermon. Even though my sermons might be fabulous, you can probably get more out of it if you talk about the lessons, just instead of just listening to me.
That's actually the one thing that I've heard people say the most is just how much they get out of services now that they're sort of forced into the arena,
right.
kind of,
Right.
It makes those of us who would normally sit back have to get in and have an opinion and have a thought and share your thoughts with other people. So we have groups meeting all over South Orange County doing that very thing. And we probably have a group very close to you if you're just catching on to us right now, if you're just joining in. So please stick around for the rest of the video to the end so you can find out how to join one of those groups.
That's right. We got some really cool stuff to talk about today. Yeah. We're excited about it. Cool. So let's get going. All right. So as we are heading into November, it is crazy that so many cool things are going on. This last month has been awesome. We got to hear from Marty Solomon from the Bema podcast, came and spoke to us. And then we had our Orange County Church of Christ regional service last Sunday. And so great just to be able to see everybody in the building and to feel the energy, and also just to hear the vision for where we want to go and the things that we really want to be able to focus on in the next year, and the way that we want to really invest in the next generation and try to create learning opportunities and serving opportunities for our teens, for our college students, for people in the younger generation. And so those of us that are maybe on the other side of that generational divide, we want to figure out how do we dream dreams for our church so that our dreams are inspiring enough that the younger people can actually catch a vision for how they can live out their life with God. So I was really excited about that, and I'm looking forward to all the things that are going on in the next year with that. And then also, probably by the time you're watching this video, I am going to be in Central America. So I'm flying down. Me and Martin Chairez are going down for a week to Central America. We're going to go to visit the church in Panama, and also spend time with the church leaders who just planted the new church in Chiriqui, Panama. So that'll be really cool. Then we're going to go to Guatemala City and spend time with all the church leaders in the church in Guatemala City. There's about 400 members in that church there. It's a great church, great people. And then Martin's going to come home, and I'm going to go on to El Salvador and spend 3 days there. And as well get to spend time with the new church leaders for the new church in Santa Ana, El Salvador. So that'll be really, really cool. I'm really excited about it. I do want to ask you to pray for me just for safety while we're there, and that I'll be able to be a help and an inspiration to all of our brothers and sisters there. So I love the mission work that we do in Mexico and Central America, and it's really exciting to be able to see that. So to be able to be there. Now, last weekend though, last Saturday, we got to go to the Mercy Warehouse.
Oh, it was so fun. Okay, if you haven't been to the Mercy Warehouse, as I had not been, I've heard about it, but I never got to go experience it. Went this past weekend with the teens. Whoop, whoop. It was really fun. It was a really great experience. And this is totally something that I want to make a part of my regular rhythm.
Yep.
Now that I've experienced it, I'm like, oh, I can totally see how this would work. You can go in, you can serve for, one Saturday a month. Maybe your small group could all decide on a weekend that they want to dedicate, like the second Saturday of every month or whatever. Or something that maybe just your own family would want to do, but it definitely was something that is worthwhile. I mean, these people, we give away all of our stuff that we don't want anymore, right? And then they sell it and they give the money to the poor, to feed people who need food. And it lines up with every one of my values. Right. We recycle and we give to the poor.
Right. Right. So that was really cool, and would love for all of your small groups to even start
so
doing
fun.
that on a regular basis, which would be cool. But another opportunity that we have coming up on Thanksgiving week is to serve with the Rescue Mission. They have their annual turkey trot that is going on. It's a
Can't
5K
wait.
run. And so some of you are probably going to run in that, which would be really cool. And then there's others of us that are going to go and volunteer and help to make the run work. So we're going to get down there early and be, checking people in for the race and helping them know what to do and where to go and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be a great thing, because the goal with that is to be able to serve and feed 30,000 homeless and low-income people for that weekend, which is a really cool thing to be able to do. So if you can participate in any way,
Let's do it.
be sure and sign up for that, and that'll be great. And then also, as we head into this season, we have our annual Hope International Day of Giving. And that's coming up, and I've sent out the email about that, and there's a great video from Ben Barnett that you can watch and look at some of the cool things that they're figuring out how to do with Hope Worldwide, which is great. But on the video, you may hear throughout the rest of the Orange County Church that we're taking up that collection on November 21st. However, for the South Orange County Church, we're going to take that up on November the 28th, because that's when we're going to be meeting together. That is our first Sunday for our Advent series, and we're going to be meeting together. And the theme
is
of that
hope.
day is hope.
Isn't that great? So
we
you'll
will
remember.
we'll take that up on that day, and I think that'll be really fun to be able to do that. But if you could look at that email and just really consider what God might want you to do to be able to help in that way, I think that would be really awesome.
Yeah.
So, and that brings us to Advent.
Yay!
And we're really excited about celebrating Advent this
Yes.
year. And we're really grateful for you guys even kind of coming along with us on the journey. That's going to be cool. But let's talk about Advent a little bit.
So Advent, if you're not familiar with it, don't worry about it, because most of us aren't, because most of us didn't come from that background. But it's basically an ancient practice in which you celebrate in great expectation the birth of Jesus, but also his second coming.
Right.
And so we take the 4 Sundays that come before Christmas, and each one is dedicated to a different virtue that Jesus provides: hope, peace, joy, and love. And so we look at the season through the lens of those virtues, one every week, to prepare our hearts, to focus ourselves on Jesus, and to make sure that our hearts are ready to receive him.
That's right. So our theme for Advent this year is making room.
Yes.
We want to be able to make room for Jesus. And we kind of came up with this from the passage out of Luke chapter 2, this talking about Jesus getting ready to be born. In verse 7, it says that she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And that thought just really struck us, that in the end, there was no room for Jesus. There was so much going on. There was so much commotion. There were so many people that were busy dealing with their lives. There was no room for the King of the universe, the King of all kings, our Savior. There was no room for him to be born.
And I'm afraid that 2,000 years later, we might be facing the same kind of thing.
That's right.
Because our lives are so busy, there's so much going on, and actually they get busier during this time of year.
Right.
And so we're wondering, if Jesus came now, would we have room for him?
Right. So we're wanting to look at even our minds, like how much stuff is coming into our minds. Are we making room mentally to be able to even think about and consider him coming back? And our schedules, you can fill up your schedule all the time. There's so many things every night, but are you making room to set aside time to really celebrate and anticipate his coming? So we're going to be talking about that in some specific ways that we can do that during that season. So we're excited about that. But today we kind of wanted to, just kind of get a head start on this. And if the first topic for Advent is hope, we want to talk about why were they hopeful? What were they hoping for? What were the people thinking about even as Jesus was coming? What were they hoping for? So we want to kind of go all the way back and think about this story. And I know that many of you know this, and I know we all know it, but it's awesome to retell it. God always reminds us to remind one another about the story, because the story of Jesus does not start in Luke chapter 2. The story of Jesus starts in Genesis chapter 1. We go all the way back to the garden, when God created the Garden of Eden, and he brought forth mankind at that point. And then from that point forward, when there was the great fall, the capital F fall, and sin came into the world, right? And you had the serpent that deceived Eve, and she ate from the fruit, and then Adam ate with her, and then they kind of got separated from God. And since then, Jesus has been on a mission to redeem us and bring us back into that relationship with God. And so we see that story playing out all through the Old Testament, because then you've got Abraham, the father of faith, and God says, I'm going to make you into many nations. You know, you cannot even be able to count your children. It's so huge. There's going to be so many of you. They're going to be everywhere. And then you had Isaac and great stories. Then you had Jacob, and he had 12 sons, and he had his favorite son, which is not a great parenting technique, but he had Joseph was his favorite son. And then his brothers got mad and jealous. They sold him into slavery. So he goes to Egypt, and he's a slave, and then he finally gets out, and God allows him to interpret dreams. So he starts interpreting dreams, and he becomes like the super most important dude in Egypt. And so he's saving them from the famine and helping them do all this. And then his family comes back, and they have this huge reconciliation, because God's story is always about reconciliation. He's about bringing people back together. And so you see that with Joseph and his brothers in that moment. And so then they start, like, they bring all the family back, and his father gets to come and see him again. And it's this great reunion. And then a few hundred years go by, and they have prospered, and there's so many of them now, but then they become enslaved by the Egyptians. And this whole idea of slavery, like, we see this through the scriptures, that God uses this picture of slavery and then him rescuing people from slavery. That's one of this theme that God wants us to see. And so he brings his people out from slavery. And then he spends 40 years with them in the desert, teaching them how to be a people, teaching them how to love one another, teaching them how the laws that they need to know how to get along and how to actually create this community. And so this is going on. And so then you've got, after that, then they come into the promised land, and they're doing all this great stuff. They're making like a home for themselves. And then they're like, no, wait, we need a king. And so then, which was a bad decision on their part, but
God said, okay. Sometimes he does that, right?
Hindsight is 20/20,
we say
right?
we want something. He's like, no, yes, please, please, please. And then he fine, okay. All right.
So then what happened?
So then we have kings. We have all the kings. We have Saul, and then we have David, and then we have his son Solomon. And there's even a split in the kingdom because they couldn't get along because they had different political ideologies, you know. And so they sort of struggle along. But the story from there goes that God is continually reaching out to them, saying, come on, live with me. I want to be with you. You know, you can trust me, do things my way. And all the way through that, you know, they're like, no, we want to do things our own way. And God would send them another prophet and say, no, follow me. I love you. Come on, we can do this, you know. But in the end, the people finally were like, we don't want to live God's way.
Right.
And so finally God is like, okay, you can live your way.
Right.
And so he allows them to be taken into slavery yet again, really is what happens. He goes, they go into captivity, half to Assyria, the other to Babylon. And they are there for 70 years.
Yeah.
So this wasn't a small consequence.
Right.
This was a big consequence. And if you doubt me, read Lamentations. It was a very, very big consequence.
Right.
But after that, after the 70 years are paid, God is so gracious and kind. He brings them back to their homeland.
Right.
And they're able to rebuild. They rebuild the wall with Nehemiah. They rebuild the temple, and they try to restore its old glory. You know, they can't quite, but they're trying. But the thing about the people when they came back, and this is the new thing for me, as I have over the past few years now been listening to Bema, and I'm so happy that Marty got to come. But one of the things that has really enlightened me is that when they came back and after they got reestablished, I always kind of pictured there's these 400 years of silence and this, you know, grim atmosphere of dread or something. I don't know what I was picturing, but like nothing good was going on. But really what happened is they came back different people.
Right.
That's what happened. They actually learned from the discipline. They actually were trained. They let God train them by it.
Right.
And so they came back different people, and they decided, you know, hey, we need to make sure this never happens again.
Right.
And this is where they started to build their incredible system of educating their kids to where they're memorizing the Torah by the time they're 5.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
they figured out.
No, not by the time they're 5. By the time they're 13.
If we don't make sure that we're educating the next generation, then this is going to happen again.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so we in the New Testament you see the stories about the synagogues, But this is where the synagogues came from.
Yeah.
Before they went into captivity, they didn't have the synagogues. But then after the captivity, then they came back, but they were spread out. There were Jews in Jerusalem, but there were also Jews back in Persia. There were Jews spread out all over the place, and they had to figure out, how do we keep this story alive? And so that's then when the synagogue system started to be developed, that they were like, we're going to have a place where we can meet on the Sabbath every week and talk about God. And we're going to educate our kids, and we have to educate our kids. So how do we do this?
Yes, and it was no longer, we can't just go to the temple.
Right.
We have to be able to do something in our neighborhood. I mean, it really was house church.
Right.
And the pandemic happened. That's kind of how it feels. It's like they had to figure out, how can we do something locally?
Right.
And they did.
Right. And so these groups, they started to kind of focus on their education system, and we've talked about that some before. How they would teach their kids, memorize all of the Torah, and then some of them are going to memorize all of the Old Testament, and then some of them would then follow the rabbi, and they were doing that. So what was going on in the rest of the world at this time? You've got all these different empires coming up, and then here comes Alexander the Great, and he conquers the world. He does his thing, and then after he dies, it kind of splits, and you got different people overseeing different parts. And then there was always tension with the people who were leading that area of the world, Judea, and then the Jews would revolt against the people who were over them. But God was with them during that time, and He was leading them. And the story of the Maccabean Revolt and where Hanukkah comes from is so cool. We're going to talk about that more in a few weeks, but it's really cool to think that God was always guiding them and leading them. But you start to see then during this time how they were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to, how do we follow God? We don't want to lose it again. We don't want to mess it up again. How do we do this right?
Right.
And so from that came these different groups or these different sects of the Jewish people, different ways of thinking. And this is a lot of the stuff I got when I listened to Marty Solomon on the Bema podcast talking about this. It just changed the way that I read the Gospels. It changed the way that I view this whole time period. And so it really helps me as I'm thinking about even celebrating Advent. It's like, this is so cool to think about.
Yeah.
But like one of the things that happened was that after the Maccabean Revolt, these guys that were so like zealous for God, like they were like, okay, we gotta get back to temple worship, and we gotta have priests in the temple who were supposed to be the priests, not that's got to be done right.
The wrong guys were doing it right, because Antiochus, who was the Seleucid that was over them, had put in all of these pagan priests, and so they're like, okay, no more pagan priests for sure. And aren't we supposed to be doing Aaron? Like, isn't Aaron the guy we're supposed to be? All of his descendants supposed to be in there. So
so they went back and they got the people who were the descendants of Aaron, and they were like, you're going to be the priests. And through Aaron, it was this guy named Zadok. One of his descendants was Zadok. So they called them the sons of Zadok, which is the Zadokine, which actually, for now then in English, it's Sadducees. So that's where all of that came from. And so you've got this group of people who are supposed to be leading the priest in the temple.
Yes.
And they were supposed to be doing that. That's where the party of the Sadducees came from. Now, they were a political party, and they had some different theological views, but one of the things about the Sadducees is that they really became corrupt. They loved the power that they had in being the priest over the temple, and they started to extort the people. They only shared power among them.
The power got to them.
The power definitely got to them.
Started off right, and that's what I think I've learned is like the original intent, the good-hearted, pure-hearted intent was corrupted.
Right.
Because power corrupts.
So then you had this other group of Jews who were like, no, that's not right.
Exactly.
We have to follow the Torah. We cannot allow corruption to come in.
Yeah.
We have to follow the Torah. In fact, the Torah is the only thing that is going to keep us here. And in fact, righteousness, we have to be so righteous, because if we're not righteous, if we allow sin and corruption into our society, then the Messiah won't come.
Right.
We have to be righteous. We have to follow the law so that the Messiah will come.
Right.
They were so hopeful for the Messiah. And so they actually moved up away from Jerusalem because Jerusalem was becoming really corrupt. They moved up to the north side of the Sea of Galilee, so Bethsaida, Capernaum, and Chorazin, and these 3 towns on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. And then that was where this center of like religious study happened. And that became the Pharisees. Right. And so the Pharisees were there. Now, there were Pharisees who were on the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was like the ruling council. So you had some of the priests were Pharisees, some of the priests were Sadducees. Some of the people on the Sanhedrin were Pharisees, some were Sadducees, some weren't of either party. So I mean, it was kind of confusing how all of it was together. But basically, you've got the Pharisees who were like, we've got to be righteous, please.
Yes.
And then as that went on, that then developed into, we have to do things so perfectly that then it became a system of legalism. And what they started out to do something so good and right, then it became like we have to perform so perfectly. And then they held everybody else to that standard too. Yeah. And so you've got these two groups that are going on. And then we had another group who was like, they were looking around, they were like, this is all crazy. And we're actually going to get out of here. We're going to go, we're going to the desert because we have to be totally separate from all of this sin. And you can't change those Sadducees. They looked at the Pharisees. They were like, why are you trying to change the Sadducees? They were like, we just got to go out into the desert and just worship God. And they were called the Essenes. Mm-hmm. And John the Baptist was probably an Essene. He was probably one of those who, that's how he was raised. Like, we've got to be separate. We've got to do this differently. And which was in stark contrast to another group called the Herodians, who basically they were like, hey, listen, we love being Jews. We love our Jewish culture and our Jewish heritage.
But hey, you can't take it too far.
That's right. We also love all of this Greek culture that's going on and all this entertainment. Nice. The games are nice. The theater is nice. We kind of like that stuff too. I think we can have it all. Yeah. Which is actually, I mean, if we're honest, that's where a lot of our culture is today. We want to be Christian, but we don't want to be too Christian. We don't want to get too radical about this righteousness thing, and so then you had...
which the Essenes weren't having it.
No.
And probably a lot of their pulling out was due to that's crazy.
Right. They were like, no, we have to...
No. Purity.
So all of these people are trying to figure out how do we worship God, because the Herodians were like, well, we got to relate to the rest of the culture.
Yeah. Gotta do something.
And so, and that's all hard. And then you had the Zealots who were, who were like,
okay.
If you're not a Jew, we're going to kill you. That's kind of how it came down to them. And so because they could not stand all of these people over them. We have to fight back.
We have to fight for our rights. We got to fight for our rights. We got to fight for God, and to them, they were fighting for God. They were like, we can't just let them tell us what to do. Don't you remember Judah, the Maccabean Revolt?
Right.
That's because of us, we fought back and God blessed it.
Right.
So that was their thinking is we have to fight back the Romans. That's what God would want us to do.
Right. We have to protect the nation of
protect
Israel.
Ours.
And so they felt like what they were doing was absolutely right in their eyes. Yeah. And so they were looking for the Messiah to come back and lead them all to push back against to battle against the Romans.
I think each one of these groups was looking for Jesus to come back in the way that they thought he would come back.
Right.
I mean, to come Jesus the first time.
Right.
They were waiting for a king to come that fit in with their view of what he would look like.
Right.
So the Zealots are expecting a warrior, and the Essenes are expecting a sage, and the Pharisees are expecting, I don't know, whatever you call the head Pharisee guy, the most perfect guy, So
who are the Sadducees expecting?
I don't know. I think they were just like, whatever. Okay. We're living it up right now. We don't really care. We don't need a savior. I mean, maybe those are those people, because when you're so enmeshed in the world, you don't see the need.
Right.
Like, I'm good. I got to get what I'm
and the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection of the dead either. Oh. So that's much more of a mindset of what's happening now is what is important.
Yes,
exactly. Only living for what is now, which is really interesting. And then the Herodians, they were probably expecting. What were they expecting?
Well, that's what I was kind of describing before. It's just that like we're just caught up in what's going on right now, and I don't really see the need. I don't need anything. I'm good.
Right.
I got everything I need.
So all of these groups thought that they were doing the right thing. And in their mind, they all had, it's kind of like they all had elements of righteousness. They all had elements of following God. But sometimes they focused so much on one particular element or one particular aspect of it that they missed when the king actually came. Yeah. They missed the Messiah that was there. Yeah. And it was hard for them to hear the things that Jesus taught when he did come, because they had such rigid expectations of what Jesus or what the Messiah should look like. And I think this is really telling, and kind of prescient for us, even as we're thinking about how in the 21st century, how are we expecting Jesus to come? If Jesus were to come back, what do we want him to do? What battles do we want him to fight? What people do we want him to tell that they're wrong because they're on the other side of an issue from us? What things do we want Jesus to fix? And would we be able to see what he wants to do or hear the message that he has if maybe it's not exactly what we want it to be?
Yeah, it reminds me of that proverb or psalm, I can't remember, where it's talking about the wicked man, or I don't know what the right word is, but it says, in all his thoughts there is no room for God. Because we have, spend so many time, I can be up in my head thinking so much, my thoughts, that there's no room for God's thoughts. Just like there was no room for Jesus when he came.
So that leads us to actually consider, even for ourselves, what is it about the way that I view the world right now that keeps Jesus from having the place in my life that he needs to have? What is it about the way that I view my time and the way that I view entertainment, or the way that I view society and the things going on and the arguments that are happening and all this stuff? There's so much happening in my head that I'm actually not able to hear from Jesus how he wants me to be. Too often we can think that Jesus is going to pick up our cause, and if we're really passionate about something, we expect Jesus to be just as passionate about what we're passionate about. But maybe we need to stop and go, you know what, let me really look into this and go, what was Jesus passionate about? It's easy for us to go, well, Jesus would think this. It's also easy for us to go back and look and go, but what was Jesus really passionate about? And maybe those are the things that we need to put our time and our heart and our energy into.
Something good, that a good self-reflection exercise is to take these 5 different groups of people, I guess, the Essenes, the Pharisees, the Zealots, the Sadducees, the Herodians, and just think, what one of those groups would I probably have been a part of? What one of the, where do I lean?
Where do you relate?
Yeah, where do you relate the most? Which one do you relate to the most? And it's such a good way to see yourself more clearly, to become more self-aware. And it would be a good idea to reflect on that.
Yeah.
So all of this is in preparation for the big day, which is actually November 28th. That's when we're going to be starting our Advent. So we're preparing for that now. But the 28th is the actual day that we're going to be meeting at the building. And I want to make sure everybody has the information, because I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh, we're meeting at 4:30. Yes, we are meeting at 4:30. We are meeting in the afternoon. But it's going to be a really special service, because we're going to be setting up differently. We're going to have a communion table right in the middle of the auditorium that has our Advent wreath and our communion on it, and we are going to be set up around the table, facing the table, so we're all coming to Advent together. And it's going to be, it's going to have a lot of beautiful decorations and whatnot, so it's going to be a really special time. And we have an incredibly special thing planned for the kids. Thank you to all of you who signed up to be on that committee. Thank you for taking care of our kids. They have a great plan for them. It's going to be so fun. We want every family to be able to come, no matter what age of your kids. Please come. And this is going to be a great time to invite your neighbors, to invite your friends, because a lot of people do celebrate Advent. But not necessarily at 4:30 in the afternoon. A lot of them might be going to a thing in the morning. So please invite everybody, because it's going to be a big deal. We're going to be getting our post up, our social media posts. Please spread it around. We're going to be getting flyers for you to be able to pass out and put up around town, I guess you could say. It's just going to be a really special time, so I'm really excited about it.
That's right. And for those of you, maybe somebody sent you this video and you want to find out more about us or get in with one of our small groups or something like that, send us an email. And our email address is socchurch@occhurchofchrist.com. That's socchurch@occhurchofchrist.com. And we'll get back to you with that. So have a great week. Start now to make room for Jesus to kind of come into your life and look for him and look for the ways that he's wanting to reach out to you. So thanks for watching today. Yay. We're really excited about all that's coming in the next few weeks. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.